beginner telescope. Well, it's good for the moon and planets, but what about deep sky? Well, people said no, but I say, oh, I'm gonna try it anyway. Well, when you look at a deep sky object using a beginner telescope like this, well, most of you gonna expect to see this, but in reality, you're going to be seeing this. But what if I told you you can actually produce this using a beginner telescope? Now first, let me explain how a telescope actually works because I found out there are lots of misconceptions about telescopes. So what a telescope does is it gathers light. Well, it's not a magnifier, it does not magnify, but it collects light. And that's what matters in deep sky astrophotography is like it's about how much light it gathers. And here you see I've attached my camera into the telescope. So what a camera can do is it collects light over long periods of time, like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and so on. And that's what we call long exposure photography. So whilst our eyes can only collect light for only a fraction of a second, and it simply isn't going to be enough to see details of galaxies and nebula because they're extremely dim and faint, and so we can only see like a gray smudge when we look through the telescope via the eyepiece with our naked eye. But the camera, it can collect light for like minutes to reveal a much more detailed image than our eyes can ever see. So what we do in deep sky astrophotography is we take as many of these long exposure photos, usually around hundreds of these, and then we combine those photos together via a process called stacking, and that will reveal hidden details within the object, like dust lanes in the galaxy, the vibrant red colors and a lot of nebulae and stuff. Now, but if you just put these set up on a normal stationary tripod and you start taking long exposure photos, well, your image would look like this. What? Now the reason is simple. So because the Earth rotates, so that is the same reason that gives us day and night. It's because the Earth rotates. And so because of the rotation, from our vantage point, the stars in the night sky appears to move. So if you put your telescope and your camera on a stationary tripod and you start taking long exposure photos, the Earth's rotation would just blur out the stars. And instead of getting pinpoint stars, you're getting star trails. And obviously it blurs out all the faint details of galaxies and nebula, because on a stationary tripod, you're not keeping your optics still with the stars. So that is why we need a tracking mount. So we have a tracking mount here, and this is one of the very reliable but yet very portable model here. This is the Sky Watcher Star Adventurer 2i. So what a tracking mount does is it will rotate on its own once you put on some batteries and you turn it on. It will rotate like this at the same rate as how the Earth rotates. So when we put the telescope and camera mount it on top of the tracking mount, like just mount it like this. So after it has been mounted on the tracking mount and you turn on the tracking mount, so the telescope and camera combo will then rotate like this because of the tracking mount, and so the telescope will rotate, and this rotation and movement allows the telescope to track the movement of the stars as it appears to move across the night sky. And so, instead of getting a picture of star trails, you can go for 30 seconds or even minutes of exposure time and still getting round pinpoint stars. And this tracking motion, it follows the movement of the stars in the night sky, is extremely vital in astrophotography because it allows for longer exposure while still keeping the stars look pinpoint and sharp. And as I said earlier, longer exposure times means more details in the faint objects. So by allowing longer exposures, a tracking mount opens the gate for astrophotography. Yeah, so there you go. This is the entire setup that will turn a beginner telescope into a gear for astrophotography. So of course you got the telescope, which collects and focuses light, and the camera will capture that light, and this tracking mount will be used to follow the movement of the stars. And of course you need the tripod as well. And in the next video, I'll be talking about polar alignment and balancing, because these are the necessary steps that you need to do in order for the tracking to work properly. And that concludes the introduction part of this series, and I hope this part has given you a better idea of what deep sky astrophotography is and what gear do you need to do it. And in the next part of this series, I'll be talking about polar alignment and balancing. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Clear skies.